about halfway through last year, that's when I realized, you know what? This is great and all. I don't want to fall into that trap of just getting people on for clicks or getting people on for clout. I made a rule. I have to be interested in what the guest is saying. And I've stayed by that. And I always say you create your own luck. Like, if you didn't ask the question, you wouldn't have got Randall on the show. If I didn't send the email, I wouldn't have got Graham. So, people, you can't have that mindset, the sky's the limit. That's the kind of thing where you're only at 40% because you've not tapped into that fight or flight mode yet. And once you tap into that fight or flight, that's where you can crank it up to the next level.
Today, we're here with Daniel Hodge, the host of the Hodgecast, which delivers unfiltered, high-impact interviews with leading voices in mindset, resilience, fitness, endurance, geopolitics, science, space, tech, and history. Sounds like literally just everything you're interested in. Is that why you called it the Hodgecast?
Yeah. So, it's quite versatile. So the Hodgecast was literally, so my full name is Daniel Hodges. And when I first started the podcast, it was purely just people saying, have a go, you'd be good at this. Like, I don't come from any kind of media background. My background's predominantly sales, recruitment. So one could argue there's a bit of overlap, let's say, but certainly in terms of you deliver stuff in front of people. But in terms of doing any sort of media, journalistic background, that's only been something that's come to me within the past 3 years. So in answer to the question, the name of it was just purely a play on words, really. My name's Daniel Hodges. Hodgecast sounds a bit like podcast, rolls off the tongue, as it were. And it's kind of stuck. And obviously now I've got a healthy-ish platform. I don't think there's any going back from renaming or rebranding now. So, yeah,
well,
I wished it was a more fun origin story, but yeah, it's literally just a play on words.
It's a play on words, but it's your name, and your podcast very much does represent like your personal interests. So it works, right?
Yeah. Well, exactly. Yeah. That's a good way to look at it.
Yeah. And so the reason why you're even on the show is because I found out about your podcast because you reached out to us. And then I was like, whoa, we've got a lot in common. And he's an interesting guy. And so there's a bunch of stuff that you do and you're into that I'd like to talk about today. But we got connected through our shared interest in ancient history. So I wanted to ask, because like you interviewed Graham Hancock on your podcast. So you've had like, ultra marathon people and different things on your podcast, and Graham Hancock. So it's a wide difference, but that's what shows your sort of your depth of like interests. When did you start your journey into sort of ancient history, and maybe that the narrative of ancient history may be wrong?
Yeah. So obviously, huge honor to interview Graham Hancock.
Yeah, man. Good job.
Fan of his work for many, many years. I would just want to go on record. I know you've interviewed quite a lot of people who that is their wheelhouse, their expertise is lost civilizations. I would be coming at it from a point of standing on the shoulders of giants. I'm just relaying what people have told me. So just in case your listeners think I'm like another younger version of Graham, let's say, far from it. But in terms of the lost civilizations and ancient history, I was first introduced to it, like many, through Joe Rogan. So obviously Joe hosted Graham on the show and Randall Carlson, who I know you guys are familiar with. And yeah, I just sort of went down the rabbit hole from there. So it was
Right.
the earlier podcast. So Joe wasn't the be all end all in the podcasting world at this stage. He was still very much only really known by fight fans of the UFC. But he obviously interviewed Graham, Randall, people of that ilk on his show. And I listened to those in the very early days because I knew Joe being a fan of the UFC. So I listened to his podcast. I thought, because if you remember, I don't know how long you've been following the Joe Rogan podcast, but some of his earlier content, he's not actually interviewing famous people. He's just chatting to friends, and there might be the odd big name who works with him on commentary at the UFC. But then he got Graham on, and Graham was sort of like the first guest he'd had on that wasn't part of the MMA world, complete opposites. And I was just enthralled with what Graham was saying. Obviously, Graham is so masterful and wonderful at his delivery, and he's so intelligent. And then I looked him up. Obviously, this was before AI. You just really had good old plain Google back then. But I had a look at Graham's background, and he had wrote loads of books. Ironically, I've got the first book I got, and I think it's one of his earliest books. One moment, because this is at the bottom of the pile, and it's one of
no worries.
The others over.
No problem. Maybe we should compare. I can't get back there.
So this here is, I don't know how well you can see that. So that's Fingerprints of the Gods, which is probably Graham's quite a girthy book at that. So this was the first insight. I mean, I highly recommend if people have got the time, if they're really interested, you can get this on audio. And obviously it's Graham narrating it, so it might be more palatable for people to listen to it. But that was the first insight into, wow, there's a lot of stuff that mainstream academia are potentially, and in my opinion, definitely keeping from us in terms of what they want the narrative to look like. And yeah, so I read that book on top of listening to all of the podcasts, and then obviously starting my own, as I'm sure you'll subscribe to, Dave. It opens up your mind. You really kind of realize after speaking to people that there's more than what's going on in terms of what we're led to believe. And that's kind of like a whistle-stop tour of how I first went into that. And then obviously starting the podcast, never in a million years did I think I'd ever land an interview with Graham. And I always tell this story because I'd love to say, a bit like the play on words with the title, it's people expect a big, good anticlimactic story kind of thing. But with Graham, it was literally, I found his email, I sent him an email, didn't expect to hear anything from it. As you'll know, I'm sure Brittany can vouch if she does your guest booking. Sometimes you hit a lot of losses and no replies than you do actual replies. 10 minutes, he responded, let's do it. Let's make it happen. So I do think I touched very, very lucky with that one. But yeah, me and Graham, we occasionally chat over email, and obviously Santha, his wife, is great. And we actually filmed that interview at his house in Bath here in the UK. Beautiful city. If ever, it's a bit of a hidden gem. Most people who come over to the UK think London, Liverpool. No, go to Bath, particularly if you come here in the summer. It's just so aesthetically pleasing. It was my first time in Bath interviewing Graham, and I've subsequently been there 3 more times. It's that good. And it's quite a fitting town for Graham to live because it's built upon history of some capacity. And yeah, he let us go in his house. Me and my team, we set up there. Santha, Graham, it was just amazing because the whole time I was interviewing, he was basically sat on his sofa, and you kind of have a bit of an out-of-body experience because as he's talking, you're very much in the moment. And then I stopped and thought, I'm interviewing Graham Hancock. This is mental. So it was really cool. It was really cool. And something I'll cherish forever. And a bit of a spoiler alert, he does want to do another interview soon. I can't give more than that, but he does want to do another one. So I can say that much.
Outstanding. Yeah, man. Graham shared our segment from Breaking Ancient News last night, and I about died.
Wow.
So if I was interviewing him, I would have had the same reaction. And he did an interview, or maybe he interviewed Debunking Dan. I can't remember which, but Dan was on the same couch, And he very much looked like you did about 30 minutes in, like, whoa, is this really happening? But you pulled it off. You managed to get through it, and it was an excellent interview, man. And I've been to Bath. It's gorgeous. I just did not know that. I did. We did a morning, like a sunset tour to Stonehenge, where we were able to literally, that's where I got this sweater. And then we were able to get in and not touch the stones, but walk amongst them. Then we went to like some small town. I forget what it was called now, just a tiny town of like 50 people where they filmed a bunch of Harry Potter, I guess. And then
I know what you mean. It will come to me.
Yeah. And then we went to Bath, and then we came back. It was like a whole, bus tour thing. That must have been so cool to be sitting there with Graham. And sometimes you do get lucky. I mean, that's kind of how we got, Randall. So he happened to, say, sure, let's go for it. And it worked out that it had talked to Scott Wolter, and Scott Wolter was like, hey, yeah, let Randall know that you guys are going to reach out. And I was like, okay. And so, sometimes it's about taking big swings. And if you miss, you miss. And if you hit it, you hit it, right?
Exactly. And I always say you create your own luck. Like, if you didn't ask the question, you wouldn't have got Randall on the show. If I didn't send the email, I wouldn't have got Graham. So, people, you can't have that mindset. The sky's the limit. You're aspiring podcast. I'm sure we're in this not just because we want to clout chase and grow the show, which of course is great, but you want to interview people who you genuinely are interested in.
Yeah, that's what our show is all about. The Multiverse is just what me and like Mike and I are interested in. And so one of those interests that I'm interested in that Mike isn't is a shared interest of ours, which is MMA. And you mentioned getting into like Graham Hancock around the same time as Joe starting his podcast and having Graham on. Similar experience. I mean, I think I saw Graham on the Joe Rogan Experience like a few weeks after the initial appearance, and I didn't even really know what a podcast was back then, like I really didn't. But I remember the thing is, I'd been exposed to this stuff about 20 years previous. Before I ever joined the military and stuff, I saw a weird documentary with Charlton Heston and Robert Schoch and stuff like that. So I had been exposed to the idea, but that particular podcast jump started me back into it at the pretty much exact same time I was getting back into martial arts as a young man. So, in getting into the UFC and stuff, and right around that time, like a few years later, like was the UFC really started taking off. So, were you like on the UFC in the 90s? Like, did you end up watching like those, garage tapes of like we would have to go to like a grocery store and like rent a bootleg of the old UFCs and take them home and stuff like that. Like, did you watch those in the 90s?
So I didn't watch them in real time in the 90s.
Neither.
I don't know what I've seen them all. I've watched the whole back catalogue. I mean, the clips you see of UFC 1 with the sumo guy getting kicked because there was just no rules. I mean, we recently had this whole eye gouge thing with Tom Aspinall.
Yes.
That would have flew. There'd have been no stoppage back in UFC 1. So I have seen them, but back in the 90s, I was hooked on WWF wrestling. So
same.
that was my go-to as a young dumb kid. That was. I think my era was sort of Stone Cold, The Rock, Mankind, Undertaker. Yeah, so the Attitude Era, as it's more appropriately known as.
I just remember my brother bringing home this thing. He's like, I think it's wrestling. So we put it in. It's UFC 1. And we're like, oh, my God. And it's just totally different now. But so you've basically been kind of a fan of the sport and the growth of it in the UK since back then anyway, though? Like,
yeah, so going back onto wrestling, there was always a wrestler growing up called Ken Shamrock. And they kept referring to him as the King of the Octagon and the
ballet judo champion.
Exactly. And I didn't know what any of this meant. And then I kind of, obviously the internet, it was around, but no one really used it to the extent we do now. And I sort of just followed Ken Shamrock. And then I noticed that he was fighting for a thing called the Ultimate Fighting Championship, which I didn't know, obviously, is the UFC. I didn't know that then. And he's fighting a guy called, he's left wrestling at this point, and he's fighting a guy called Tito Ortiz. So that was my first. So it was the transition from wrestling was getting a bit stale. I realised a bit like the Father Santa Claus syndrome. I knew wasn't real. Spoiler alert. And then I sort of transitioned from into fake fighting into real fighting, and yeah, that it was kind of like you said. I think I thought, oh, this is another wrestling show. Is this like WCW? Or and then yeah, you see, oh no, this is actual violence. They are hitting one another.
So when my brother and I like saw this literally a week later, we were at this like local boxing gym. Did that do that to you too, or?
So I can't. The whole concept of mixed martial arts
didn't really,
yeah, it was alien to me. You either did boxing, kickboxing, Muay Thai. It wasn't until I come across the UFC, and like you touched on there, the earlier renditions of it, that's what it was. It was kind of like Street Fighter, the video game. You have one person who's good at one thing, one person against another who's this. And it's only as time's gone on, they've adapted and blended it all together. So I never really understood the concepts of mixed martial arts. I thought that was a totally different sport in terms of a discipline. Not that it was a hybrid of everything. But yeah, I think it was a local gym near us, near Liverpool, that opened up that was just mixed martial arts. And I never went, but I knew people that did, because I always grew up with boxing. Like that was my go-to sport. I've dipped my toes in the other, so I've had to go at all the other disciplines. But in answer to your question, yeah, I wasn't familiar with the terminology. I just followed Ken Shamrock into the UFC and then just got hooked on it then and thought, I like this. I liked wrestling, which I realized that that's not legit. This is, and I just gravitated towards that. So I used to binge watch it all the time. You sort of, after Tito Ortiz, you had your Chuck Liddells, your Forrest Griffin, people of that nature.
That whole Spike TV era.
Yeah. Exactly, yeah. And then I sort of, because it's on so late over here, and up until recently, the UFC don't accommodate, and I just couldn't stay up late watching it. And I didn't fall out of love. I can put a fight on now and enjoy, but I kind of didn't follow it post that kind of era. My last sort of big name before I stopped watching it religiously was George St. Pierre.
Okay.
And then I actually missed, admittedly, even though I'm a huge fan of his work, the Mike Bisping era. I kind of moved away from it, which being a fellow Brit, you'd have thought I'd have been on that. And then I kind of joined it back when obviously the Conor McGregor's, rise to popularity. I jumped on the bandwagon, as it were. And yeah, I kind of just watch it sporadically when I can, because there's a lot of British fighters now. Obviously, Tom Aspinall, huge fan.
There's a lot of British fighters.
Yeah, so there's a lot of British guys. So I try and make a point of keeping tabs on them. I have to ask you though, who do you honestly think would have won out of John Jones, Tom Aspinall? And you don't have to say Tom because the Brit's on the show. I'm happy for you to say otherwise.
It's $1 million question because we all know that for those of you who don't know, because there might be people watching who have no idea what we're talking about. Tom Aspinall is the reigning heavyweight champion. He's the interim champion. The other guy, who's supposedly the greatest of all time, John Jones, was the heavyweight champion, but he retired for like 2 years. Nobody knew if he was going to fight or not, and then he straight up retired. So they never got to fight. And then this last weekend, Tom Aspinall, this Brit that Daniel's talking about, fought for the belt. He's the most unlucky guy in the world because he got poked in the eye, and nobody got the belt. But anyway, John Jones, the GOAT, versus Tom Aspinall. I think Tom would have won just based off of age. I think fighting's very much a young man's sport, and that there wasn't a lot of gap in wrestling with Tom and John, where there was a huge gap in wrestling with Cyril Gahn and John, and that's why he was able to take advantage of it so badly. So I think Tom would have probably hurt him pretty early. I think if he got off on him. It's just young guy, young, big, 265, punching 38-year-old who's barely 240. I don't know, man. That's a bad
It's
matchup.
and Tom's, and I say this from a completely neutral perspective. The genetics of Tom, as you mentioned, he's a big guy, but he's
Huge,
so quick.
fast.
He trains at a gym in my hometown, Evolution Gym. And I don't know Tom to talk to, otherwise I'd have probably had him on the show by now. But I sort of like, when he's in there, I might watch what he's doing. And when you see him up close, training and sparring and hitting the pads, I think he gives anyone of any generation trouble of the heavyweight. He's just so fast, so strong. And like you said, I think John would only have the edge, and it would be a very, very narrow edge if it got on the ground. I think the longer Tom Aspinall and John Jones, Tom stays vertical, John's not going to be, and again, it's age as well. John's not going to be able to handle that.
Age and size and damage. Like Tom has not taken any damage in any fights.
No. Well, he got a bit of blood, and I know
in the last one.
Yes, because I went and read all
with that jab though.
And I think some people who are maybe naive to how sport works, they think blood is a representation of someone's losing, and it's like actually. Some people thrive when they bleed, so do not be deceived by the visuals.
Yeah, and sometimes like one shot will make someone bleed just because it hit weird, and the other guy could totally be winning. So yeah, true story. But I wanted to kind of pivot into kind of what you've been up to lately, and in order to do that, like I know probably one of the reasons you like MMA and boxing and that kind of thing is it's the extreme, like first of all it's a team sport, but in the end it's individual, and there's an extreme amount of individual endurance and individual resilience and individual toughness, both mental and physical, that I feel like you really are very interested in, both like learning about and pushing yourself through. And I was wondering, have you always been like that, or what inspired you to start learning about the limits of human endurance and that kind of thing, and also starting to push yourself because you're doing a bunch of crazy stuff right now?
Yeah. I mean, admittedly, my training for the past few weeks, I mean, I still train. You'll always get the best version of me if I've got a goal that I'm striving to, which at the moment I haven't. Well, all my goals are podcast related.
Sure.
As Brittany will vouch, I've got quite a big project coming up, which we may or may not talk about. So most of my fitness goals, they're non-existent at the moment, but of course you're referring to my body of work. So I mean, I'll sort of give so I'm going to touch on sort of like my origin story, if you will, for lack of better phrasing. It pivots like quite dark, but there's obviously positive as well, but I'll try and give it as condensed as I can and easy digestible.
Take your time, my friend.
In answer to the question with relation to sport, I've always, because I was a fan of wrestling and I was a fan of mixed martial arts. Over here in the UK, if you was a fan of MMA back when I was growing up, I think a lot of people made the comparisons of it being wrestling being fake, MMA is likely fake. You weren't considered cool, as I suppose where I'm going to. Whereas now, you're very cool if you like MMA, but back then you wasn't. So I don't know if we can make the parallels if it's like that in the States back when you was growing up. I don't know.
I think so. Similarly, yes. So they got put in the same box for sure.
Yeah, exactly. So growing up, I was never considered sort of cool. And in school, I was never really a huge fan of sports, you guys call it gym. We call it PE or physical education.
I'm from Canada. We call it PE in Canada.
Okay, so great. So we're on the same page on that one. Yeah, because trying to explain that, even though physical education, pretty self-explanatory, some people struggle to wrap their heads around that. So I was never into anything like that. I always got picked last for gym. I always got picked last for soccer, football. They usually put me in net, goalie, bigger guy. I'm likely less chance of them getting a goal. So I was never really a huge aspiring athlete. I think people who know me now just automatically assume that sport's been embedded in me from a very young age. Far from it. So I kind of grew up, obviously being this kind of nerd, dorky kind of guy growing up into wrestling, MMA, video games, which ironically I don't play video games at all now, but I used to love them. Yeah, and then I kind of grew up like most people and discovered alcohol, drugs, recreational, women, and then when I found that I drank, it kind of brought out a true version of me, but a more exaggerated version of me, which happened to be quite loud, charismatic, funny. In the UK, we're very much big on sarcasm. I bring that in abundance. And I think I started to go from this dorky guy to, oh, I'm actually quite popular now with my peers. So I sort of gravitated towards that lifestyle a bit more than perhaps I should have done, to the point it kind of took control of me, particularly the drug cocaine. I was hooked on that stuff. There's a lot more intricacies. I'm kind of just giving a condensed version.
Man, I got a whole origin story very similar, so I get all everything that's in between there. But I appreciate you very much for sharing that with us.
No, of course. I'm very open and public about this now, so there's no, I'm not going to get a PTSD or triggered or anything like that.
I'd say thank you anyway for
sharing. No, I appreciate it. So I kind of just fell into that trap, as it were, and then most people, as I'm sure Dave you'll be able to relate to, it kind of takes a hold of you and puts you in a bit of a dark place, to the point that that's all you're doing. All your friends who were doing that life stuff with you, they've moved on. They've got families, they've got properties, they're moving on with their life, businesses. I wasn't. And even though I was very good at holding down a job, worked in recruitment, sales, most people, particularly back in those days who were involved in recruitment, it's very fast paced, it's very high energy, you need to be alert. Well, what's a drug that ticks all those boxes? So obviously I was kind of feeding myself into a bit of a frenzy, but consequently, as a result, I always had money. And I can't remember who said it, but they said the worst thing you can give an addict is money, because they're going to use that money to pay the habit. So I was, on paper, people who maybe didn't know, I probably looked like, Hodges, he's always got money, he's always out, he's always living his best life. Social media was around. It wasn't this bread maker that it is today. I mean, people had Instagram, but you was lucky if you got like 10 likes on your post, you were like, jackpot, I'm so popular. But so that's where you was at with it. So on paper, as I say, I probably looked like I was doing well, I was enjoying myself, but behind closed doors, I wasn't. I was struggling. And being a guy over here in the UK, we touched on, I'd kind of fallen into that trap of getting popular, brushing shoulders with certain people. You don't open up, you don't talk about it. And it kind of all culminated into, I'd been on a 3-day bender one time after my birthday. Ironically, in October, it was my birthday tomorrow, I believe, as a matter of fact.
Oh.
So I've been on a bender, and you kind of into November, and I just woke up and decided enough was enough, and had an attempt on my life. I took a cocktail of pills of all varieties, just hoping that would end it all. Something that I missed out is I'd moved back into my parents' house after a relationship had ended. Thankfully, and I've got a great relationship with my mom, is she basically heard me ODing and, came upstairs. I've obviously blacked out at this point. She did the necessary, CPR, medical endeavors, phoned the paramedics, they come pick me up. And then I've obviously, this is not a memory I have, but I was in a medically induced coma for 52 hours. So that's the graphic part out the way. The positive parts to come now. So I sort of, after that, and it didn't happen overnight, so I am giving you kind of like 5 years into a very small segment. But in answer to your question, it was from then I kind of had that epiphany moment where I thought, I need to channel this addictive energy into something else, because there's a lot of energy there. I've got a lot to give, but I'm focusing on drugs, drink, and this party lifestyle. Why don't I look at focusing this on other avenues? And this is where I always say that the second part of my life began, because I'm not a religious, and we may touch about religion, but I'm not religious, but I do kind of believe in affirmations and manifestation, and I suppose you could say I'm a spiritual thinker, in large part to some of the stuff Graham Hancock's touched on. But
Sure.
yeah, segueing away from that. So yeah, and at the time I did it, there was an advert that came up. As I say, social media was around, but it wasn't very popular. And I just happened to be on Facebook, and I seen an advertisement to sign up to go and do Everest Base Camp. And this was a few days after, you know, what had happened to me, and I thought, I wonder if that's a sign. I wonder if that's like, I've never done anything like that before. So I inquired, I signed up, and ironically, it was 12 months after what I'd been through, give or take a couple of days, but 12 months after I'd been through, we got to the top of Everest Base Camp. And looking back in hindsight now, it's kind of like my Cinderella moment, if you will, where I'd gone from being at rock bottom to essentially on top of the world by completing that. And then I realized that that was a natural high that cocaine would never, ever give me. So I've always pursued that and always gone down the avenue of, I've got this addictive personality. Let's channel this into, I can do Everest. So now let's go do all this other crazy stuff. So this is where I ended up running marathons, you know, actually getting in the ring, a boxing match, skydives, triathlons, ultra marathons, various. I did Kilimanjaro a few years back. So yeah, I've kind of, I mean, this year I did 10 back-to-back marathons in April. I don't know if you can tell on this camera, but I'm quite a big guy. I mean, I'm 6'2". Well, I work in stone, so what would that be? Probably about 240 pounds, 17 stone. So yeah, I'm not
You're
really
a solid heavyweight.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm not really built for running. So when I say running, it's more of a plod. It's
Plodding,
yeah,
You're
exactly.
a plodder.
So yeah, and then ever since then, that's how I come into kind of pushing the boundary, and I get more. And again, it is an addiction, but it's now been channeled into this addiction where you're getting more of a natural high and fulfillment, as opposed to just going to the bar and staying up all hours.
I love it. I identify with that a lot.
Okay.
Because similarly, and I'm not gonna, this is about you, not me, but like when I came back from Iraq, I was all messed up in the head and drinking and all this stuff and trouble with the law and all the stuff, and was basically forced to like choose between like sobriety or prison, and that's an easy choice. But I did the same thing. I went and not nearly as extreme as you, but like as far as like extreme in that, like in the addictive part of it, where it's like I gotta get my workout in. I gotta push myself as hard as I can almost every day. And if I didn't, I'd have this like itch I needed to scratch. It felt like, but this is only because this happened to me 4 years ago. But I got that basically drug, my high, which was running, which was martial arts, which was lifting weights, which was boxing and Muay Thai and things like that. Just getting that energy out. I got that taken away from me by a back injury that I'm still kind of managing today. And so I've had to kind of learn how to like not be an addict again over the last 4 years with that taken away. Have you considered that? Like, I don't mean to like throw, but like, what if that like what if you can't like push yourself like like what's
No, yeah, I completely get it. I mean, there's obviously, you know, being into fitness and sports yourself, there's nothing worse than having an injury, and it can be
it's the
something
worst.
as simple as, you know, maybe not as you know, you where you're running, your calf's injured, so you can't run on it properly. I mean, you can do, but you're going to do more harm to it, and it is very frustrating. I think you hit the nail on the head with the comment you said that, you know, making sure that you train, do these things, you're kind of creating affirmations that have turned into habits. So there's a great book, if you guys, your listeners have ever read it or listened to it on audio, Atomic Habits by James Clear. Yeah, it's one of the best books I've ever read, and it's such an easy read because when you read it, a lot of the stuff you probably already execute in your day-to-day life anyway, but you just haven't thought about it the way he articulates. Yeah, and obviously I'm one of those guys now. I'm very much about routine. I'm very much about, kind of not discipline in the sense I'm like military or anything,
Yeah.
but and I think having these daily goals is great because, as you touched on, if you're injured and you maybe can't train or do the workout you want to do, you've got other goals throughout the day to fall back on. So I do, and they don't have to be fitness related. They can just be
Sure.
whatever, setting up a podcast, reading a chapter of a book, meditating, whatever your preference. And I do find that helps me if I can't do, I'm going to be pissed off if I can't do the workout I wanted to do for the day. But I've kind of grown accepting that it's not the end of the world. There's
Sure.
always tomorrow, or I can adapt the workout. I mean,
Yeah.
Chat GPT is a blessing really in disguise, where if I've got a workout and I need, could I tweak that a little bit, just pin that workout in, and you'll probably get about 10 recommendations of very, very
Sure.
brilliant workouts. So yeah, I suppose I've gone all around the houses there, but the point is having other goals to help balance your day is what I found worked for me.
Yeah, I think that's a great answer and a great book reference. James Clear, Atomic Habits. Excellent listen. If you're not a big book reader, if you spend a lot of time in the car, excellent listen. Yeah, because you have, I like that, having a fallback if you do get injured, which was for me, like I had to stop doing martial arts, stop running in races, stop lifting heavy, and really just start focusing on like things like breathing, yoga, walking, tai chi, things like that, which are basically the exact opposite of what I was used to doing. But luckily I did have like some mindfulness, meditation, other things in place. And I had to find another goal, which was, that's how I put a bunch of energy into starting this podcast instead. And so that's a great answer. I really appreciate that. And I'm glad you shouted out that book. So let's talk about a goal like 10 marathons in 10 days. How does one like go about planning for something like that? And then like broadly speaking, how do you choose like what the hell you're going to do next? Like, because you said you get the best out of yourself when you have something in your sights. Like, do you just wait for like an inspiration, or like, is there a process? What are we doing here?
No. So, I mean, I would advise, I know this might sound contradictory to some of the stuff I've said, but I'm not endorsing anyone runs 10 back-to-back marathons.
No, neither
You've
am
got to
I.
be pretty psychologically damaged like me to want to do that. Unless, of course, you're someone like David Goggins and you thrive in that kind of environment.
Sure.
But yeah, so in answer to your question, with me, I often say to people, it's that age-old cliche, comparison's the thief of joy. You shouldn't be comparing yourself to other people. In the same way, you shouldn't compare yourself to other people, because then you're always going to be striving for perfection, and perfection doesn't exist. There is no such thing. We might have this idea of what perfection is. We're way off the mark, because those who we think are perfect will have that same thought process about other people.
Yeah.
So where I'm going with this, how this translates to endurance challenges, that was my problem. I'd do something like a marathon, and then I'd want to strive for my perfection doing something that's even bigger. But then I kind of got to a point in my life where I thought, I'm going to be doing this. Where does it stop? Like, am I going to be one of those guys who runs around the world, or even though I've got a world record there, which I'm
going to ask you about in a second. Yeah,
ask
you
me
can
about that in a moment,
segue.
because
Yeah.
that is, despite everything I'm talking about here, that's not a record what you'll think it is.
Okay.
I've completely took myself off thought there, but yeah. So I realized I'm going to keep doing this, and it's going to be a case of I'm never going to achieve perfection. So then I started the podcast, because I thought, rather than constantly doing these, because I did, so 1 year, so 2022, I did a white collar boxing fight. I did the Berlin Marathon, and I did Mount Kilimanjaro. 3 big life-changing events. Well, I decided to do them unintentionally. It was just the timing they was all on. I decided to do them in a 1 month window. So did the boxing. I mean, the boxing, I suppose you could argue, was a little bit longer because I did the 8-week training camp. But in terms of the actual fight, the run and the mountain,
yeah, but they all happening in the same week.
It was
That's
all
a lot.
it was all
month,
happening in the
sorry,
same
that's a
month.
lot.
So yeah, and obviously there are 3 completely different variations of training. Dave, you'll subscribe. Boxing's it's disciplined. You have to embrace a skill set as well as be incredibly fit. With running, depending if you're after a time, the Berlin, which I wasn't, but running a
lot of
marathon,
patience.
Exactly, and you've got to be able to endure the pain. And then obviously Kilimanjaro, essentially it's just walking. But if anyone's ever done Kilimanjaro or done any altitude, that's the hardest one out the 3. Because that, even though it's low intensity, heart rate's got to be down, breathing's got to be right. If you get that altitude sickness, you are done for. Like I cast my mind back to being at top of Kilimanjaro, one of the worst experiences of my life. And I won't be too graphic because it is quite vulgar, but it was coming out both ends. And you can't walk fast. When you're at altitude, everything's in slow motion. And when you've got to go to the toilet because of what I've just described, and the toilet's a good 200 yards away, you can't run at that toilet. If you run, you're going in a cardiac arrest up there. So you've just got to slowly walk. And bear in mind, you're on a mountain in darkness. It's like being on the moon in terms of visuals. Not that I know what that's like, but I can imagine it. And you're literally walking, gotta go to the bathroom. And yeah, it was not it's not something I look back on with fond memories, put it that way. But we got up to the top and, made it all worthwhile. So I did all that in a month. That was in 2022. And I thought, I can't keep doing this because that's for those just doing one of those challenges that I did, that would be enough for someone in a lifetime. And I'm by no means bragging or flexing, saying
no, but it's true.
Yeah. So I just thought I don't want to be doing this every year because also as well, you do these challenges too frequent, you lose the fulfillment it gives you because it just becomes your new norm. So this is where I then started the podcast. And again, I fell into the podcast by pure chance and just set it up similar to Rogan, I guess, probably similar to yourself, Dave. I just got friends on. We just was, if you watch some of, I think Brittany had a look at some of my earlier stuff the other day. I mean, she was very complimentary, but I think my early stuff is dreadful. So yeah, but I suppose you've got to start somewhere. And then obviously that grew, and then all the energy that I previously put into the addiction that went into training, I then put it into the podcast. And hopefully I can kind of be testament that if you do channel that addictive energy into something that you enjoy, you can make it work. You can climb Kilimanjaro. You can make a successful podcast. You can do whatever, start a new hobby. But then I ask all the guests on my show, I always ask, what does challenge mean to you? And I asked that question because that was why I set it up, because I had my own personal challenges. I've done all these physical ones. So that's kind of putting the foundations of why I started the show and, how I channeled all that energy into something. But then as I've been doing it for 2 years, it's coming up to 3 years, but 2 years at that point, I thought, well, I have to stay true to my roots because I started it because I was doing challenges. So I've had a year or 2 off doing anything big. What should I do? Do I do another mountain? Do I do another marathon? I've done those before. And then I got a place in the London Marathon and I got a place in through Samaritans, which, as I touched on my, so do you guys have Samaritans in the States or Canada? I'm not sure.
What is it?
So the Samaritans is a charity. It's a 24-hour helpline. So if you're feeling down, you're feeling depressed, you're feeling suicidal, you can phone them up and so on.
We got similar stuff, yeah.
Okay. So they were a big help for me back when I was going through my troubles. So I felt I had a duty of, I don't like being the guy who does stuff for charity because there's a few question marks and questions that are unanswered with relation to how they operate, but we'll not get into that. But with Samaritans, I kind of trusted them and I felt it ties into what I'm all about. And I thought, well, I know I can run a marathon. I know I can run a marathon at a respectable time. I don't consider myself a pro athlete or anything of that nature. So I'm not really striving for a personal best time. If it comes, it comes. That's never my ambition. My ambition is to do something noteworthy. And I always had this idea in my head, but I never felt as though I was fit enough. A couple of years ago, I did, during the pandemic, I did a 10-kilometer run every day for 30 days throughout the month of January. And on the last day, this wasn't part of the plan. Someone kind of dangled that carrot in front of me, run a marathon on the last day, which I ended up doing. But I suppose I had done a crash course of running prior to the marathon for the previous 29 days. So ever since completing that, and because I made it a community challenge, so I was running with different people each day, so it had that real wow factor.
That helps, huh?
Exactly. And I kind of thought, well, if I've done 10 kilometers, I wonder if I could do 10 marathons in 10 days. There was just something that really appealed. I know that might sound crazy, but something that really appealed to me about it. And because I thought that a couple of years back, and then I got a place in the London Marathon. I wanted to do something big because it was kind of like my comeback challenge from having a two-year hiatus. And I just thought, you know what, let's do it. I'm fit. I'm probably the fittest I've ever been. We can make this work. We can do it. I'll sort out the logistics. And yeah, that's how that materialized into doing it. Surprisingly, I'd never done more than a marathon. Oh no, sorry, I'd done an ultra, but I'd never done more than 50 kilometers in one session. And the thought of getting up the next day after a marathon, I don't know if you guys have ever done one, but the thought of getting up the next day, exactly, it's horrendous. You don't want to do anything the next day. You just want to chill out, eat as much food as you can, and pretty much, just recover. So the thought of getting up and doing it again, and then again, and then again, and then again, right the way up for 10 days was probably the hardest mental battle I'd had. Day one was fine. It wasn't unknown territory. Day two, getting up was tough, but when I got going, I felt great. It wasn't really, I didn't feel like I'd ran a marathon the day before. Day three, same scenario, but I'd slowed down massively. I couldn't find that I could speed up. And then day four is when everything really started to change. So at the end of day three, I felt quite a severe niggle in my in one of my shins, and I was obviously I just put it down. Well, that's normal. I've just ran 3 marathons. I'm gonna feel pain. But then day four, I was struggling to put any weight on my right foot. And this was really starting to hurt. And I was only about 5 kilometers in. Well, a marathon's 42.2 kilometers. So quite a lot to go. And then on top of all the other marathons. But what I made a point of doing, I never wanted to get myself checked out, because I thought, if I know what's wrong with me, that's going to play into my psyche throughout.
The mental,
so I kind of channeled my inner David Goggins and just went for it. Things started to ease. Obviously, there's a lot of painkillers involved in this, which again I'm not endorsing. I kind of just managed to get through it all. The last day, so the last one, which was at the London Marathon, that was actually my best time as well throughout all 10 of them. So it wasn't intentional. I think the crowd just spurred me on.
Yeah, that's probably it. Yeah.
And then after I completed it, I spent a couple of days to decompress in London. I went to go see a physio, got an x-ray, and I didn't tell them at this stage what I'd done. I just thought, let's just see what the diagnostic is. And they come back to me and said, can we just ask, what is it you it's bizarre, because the scans show us that you've had a tear, it's tried to heal, but it's teared again. And then I come clean and said, well, I've just ran 10 back-to-back marathons. They were really taken aback by it. And it turns out I'd torn a ligament completely. And it looked like, going off their diagnostic, it looked like on that day 4 is when I tore it. So, and it's going to make me sound really macho supremo here, but yeah, I basically ran the other 6 with a torn ligament, which again, I don't advise, but yeah, that's just the kind of person I am, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, some people would hear that and think you sound like a crazy person. But I think I personally think it's badass, and I as well am sort of, I'm trying to think of the right word. Very fascinated with the limits that you can push the human body. David Goggins, if you guys don't know who he is, he's a ultra marathon runner, basically been former special operator in like 3 different categories in the U.S. military, which has never been done before. He's a motivational speaker, that kind of thing. But he has this idea. It's generally speaking, but he calls it the 40% rule, and he says that your mind will want to give up at about 40%. But your body can actually go to 100 and pass sometimes. And so that's obviously arbitrary, the number 40, but do you sort of subscribe to that now that you've experienced it yourself? Like you can mind over matter shit if you really want to. Is it advised? I don't know, but
Yeah, I mean, obviously, if I mean, we're not amongst sports scientists here, so I suppose we're coming at it from a completely different lens, if you will.
Just from our own personal experiences doing endurance challenges and stuff.
I mean, I do like the 40% rule. It's something I've always been fascinated with. And similarly, there's, we referenced David Goggins there, but there's lots of other people. I don't know if you're familiar with Ross Edgley, he's a British guy. He swam around. In fact, he's just swam around Iceland, but he swam around the perimeter of the United Kingdom. Incredible story, and he's testament to. I think it's one of those things. I think if you really want to do something, then your body won't give limitations to it. It might make things harder, but there's a famous quote from, we have a sport here in the UK, and it's only actually in the north of the UK where I'm from, called rugby league. So there's rugby union, rugby league. Rugby league's a bit more high impact, old roughneck kind of game. But there was a famous, he's sadly no longer with us, but there was a famous guy called Steve Prescott, and he did lots of endurance challenges. No one outside the UK will know who he is, but he had a famous mantra of what the mind believes, the body achieves. And I think that's something that's really testament to, if you take part in these endurances or anything. I mean, we've all been in a situation, I'm sure, you don't have to be running marathons to experience this, where your fight or flight kicks in. Your epigola sort of alerts you to do other things. Well, that works in both avenues. If you don't even have to be a combat sport expert. If someone is attacking you and you can only defend yourself, you're going to find this animalistic instinct that allows you to fight back. Even if you don't win, you're still going to do it. Now, you probably wouldn't be that way inclined to fight someone just for the sake of it, or just to resort to violence. You would do it in that particular moment because your brain deems it necessary. So that is the same, I can't think of the word. That's the same sort of attribute that
mechanism.
Mechanism. Great. Well, reflex is probably what I was looking for, but yeah, mechanism works. That's the same reflex that you'll have in the situation, like I was with the marathon, and like David Goggins is whenever he's running the Moab. That's the kind of thing where you're only at 40% because you've not tapped into that fight or flight mode yet. And once you tap into that fight or flight, that's where you can crank it up to the next level. You hear that all the time, like with boxing, when they're on the 12th round. On paper, doesn't matter how athletically fit you are, to do 12, especially when it's a real slugfest and they've gone for it for the first 11 rounds and they're on the final one. In theory, nobody should be able to have energy to fight. And yeah, they're going to be tired. The pace is slowed down. That's just physical limitations. But you often find that if they get an opening in that 12th round, that fight or flight kicks in and that adrenaline takes over and they end up usually winning the fight. So it's the same principle. Obviously, we're making the comparisons to athletic feats here, but you can have that in business. You can have that in podcasting. If you're having a stimulating conversation, or even if you're not and you feel you need to say something, then that fight or flight will kick in and provide you with what you need. So I think I love that mantra of what the mind believes the body achieves. Obviously, I'm a guy who's big on manifestation as well, and I think if you manifest and work hard enough, you can ignite that 40% rule, as you labeled it.
Yeah, and manifestation often gets lumped in with like hippie woo-woo stuff, but it's not. Manifestation is simply like, I mean, it sounds as cheesy as it is. Like, the whole Luke Rockhold, believe and achieve. Like dream, believe, achieve. Michael Bisping always made fun of him for saying that. But the truth is, the biggest things I've ever accomplished in my life, I've had a vision of me doing those things in the future, and daily I was making decisions almost subconsciously, putting those pieces into place to accomplish those goals. So I wanted to ask you just about that, the day-to-day stuff. I mean, how regimented are you with sleep, with food, with training? Because there's a line, right, like of being over regimented and whatnot. So how do you handle that?
So I'm going to sound like I've probably peaked too soon now with these 10 marathons, because with this question, this is going to bring me right back down to earth and make me sound really, really boring.
Normal?
Yeah, normal. No, admittedly, I'm probably too regimented in what I do, but it works for me. So I mean, going back to my story, just so I can kind of add a bit more meat to the bone. So only recently have I gone fully teetotal. I stopped doing drugs several years ago, but I'd occasionally have a drink, celebratory drink, that sort of thing. Now I don't drink. And it's not a case of I don't drink because I don't want to worry about turning into the Hodge of yesteryear. I just don't enjoy the way it makes. I hate being hungover.
Oh, it's the worst.
With the podcast, I love having clarity. I feel as though I can take on more information, because if I get a guest on, I go down the rabbit hole with a guest. I do the due diligence. If they've got books, I read the books. I listen to. I like that. I like to give them the best possible service I can, because they're doing me a favor by coming on the show, but also in return, I don't want the interview to look like I don't know what I'm talking about. And there's a lot of guys and girls that do that. They just get it, particularly like, let's say someone got Graham Hancock on. He is, of course, going to generate loads of views. But if you're not interested or show no level of wanting to be interested in what he's saying,
Sure.
you're going to give him a bad interview. I imagine you guys had it with Randall as well. So it's in relation to, I like having the clarity. I've now worked out that my day-to-day is pretty regimented in a sense. I eat the same foods pretty much every day. I'll have one cheat meal a week, which usually I kind of splash out. Over here we have a Sunday roast, so it's kind of like, I expect what you guys eat on Thanksgiving, no doubt.
Sure.
That sort of carvery type food. Or I'll have like a takeaway of some capacity, kind of treat yourself. So, but other than that, I'm pretty regimented with everything I eat. I make sure I get all my macros. I'm big on sleep now, probably because I had so little sleep throughout my 20s. I'm catching up, as it were. So yeah, I make sure I get 8 hours, and I've got to that point now. Even if I get 8 hours, if I check my watch and it says I didn't have optimal sleep, I just had good sleep, that really annoys me for the rest of the day. So yeah, I'm pretty regimented. I work out every day in a morning. I'll have one rest day. But I tend to do my workouts are very much, they're either very intense or they're very long, like endurance style. And even though I'm not training for anything, I just find that works for me. And also I like to be ready. So I don't know what my next big challenge is going to be. If I've done 10 marathons in 10 days this year, I'm only going to do something bigger than that when it eventually comes around. So I need to be ready. My body needs to be in fight mode all the time, which is also a reason why I don't drink, because alcohol, there's no, and this is not me preaching or anything like that, but there's no positive implications to drinking. Like, people might turn around and say, "Oh, a glass of wine's bullshit. A glass of wine isn't the ethanol that's in the wine isn't good for you." Yes, we're all entitled to have a social life, and if people get their fix from drinking, that's cool. But don't try and tell me the science is that it's potentially good for you. It's not. In the same way, eating lots of sweets isn't good for you, and people would argue that is. But anyway, digress. So yeah, I'm pretty regimented in terms of what I eat, what I drink. I also like to. I've tried the whole meditation thing. I don't know if it's because I live in quite a noisy suburban area. I can't quite get absolute tranquility. I suppose if I lived more rural, I might benefit it more. And you can go into the woods around our place, but it's got to be full of people. So there's no real tranquility. But I have tried it. A big fan of, I don't know if you guys have heard of Naval Ravikant. So he's an American investor. And again, shout out to
I've seen him on Rogan too, and a couple other shows too.
Yeah, and he's great. So he's like a philosopher stroke investor, and he's very big on meditation. But I suppose he's got the financial resources to hire a quiet place to meditate. But yeah, it just didn't work for me. But since starting the podcast, so I've referenced a lot of books here. Only within the past 3 years have I started reading. The notion of reading was, no way. I can't. There's no chance I can sit there, read a book in its entirety. But because of the podcasting, that's all I do. Like those that are on display, just the ones that are on display, they're what I've read this year. So that's why they're there. You know, and then obviously since I started the podcast, I've just read more and more books. The only books I read kind of growing up were, like I referenced before, Graham Hancock's, that sort of thing. But I didn't read as religiously as I do now. And now I can read something, even if I'm not that interested in what it's about. If I know it's for a guest or I know there's a reason behind it, I'll still read it. And yeah, so now the reason I've told you about all the book reading is because that is something I factor in my day to day. I try to read a chapter at morning and a chapter at night. And I actually get quite annoyed if I don't read the chapter. So yeah, that's why I say it works for me, because it keeps me kind of balanced throughout the day.
Well, I think, like I mentioned, I suggested at the beginning, like you can quote unquote over regiment is what I said, but at the same time, you can under regiment as well and get nothing done. Like I'd rather be over regimented than under. And I'm very much the same way. I'm kind of worse at it the last couple of years than I was for the previous 10 to 15 years before that for some reason. But I very much understand, like if you can gamify your life that way, right? It's like a video game where you grind to go up levels in a video game. You could do the exact same thing in your real life. You just, set it up. Okay, I'm going to do this for an hour every day. I'm going to do this for an hour every day. I'm going to do this for an hour a day. And you do it. There's no other, honestly, there's some people with what they call the Mickey Mantle gene, who's a baseball player who apparently drank, smoked cigarettes, stayed out with hookers all night, never worked out. He could walk onto the baseball field at Yankee Stadium and just hit homers all day long. Some people have that, but that'll burn out eventually, right? So I appreciate that. And so you mentioned your podcast a few times. I want to switch towards that a little bit, because what you do is a lot different than what we do here. And I really appreciate what you do with your podcast. And you said a few key things there. You really called it providing a service to our guests. I'm going to take that and think about that when approaching our guests. And see if I can add that to, how I look at things and how I work with my guests. But you really, for example, like you want to do all the interviews in person. You don't want to do virtual. If they have a book, you want to read the whole thing and make sure you understand it. You want to really go down their rabbit hole. And so what I've noticed is there's no way I could put out the output I put out. Like I couldn't with reading all the authors I talked to, for example. So what you do is you space it out. You make sure you're prepared for every single interview. And I like the idea of service to the guests on your show. Can you talk to us a little bit about that philosophy and where you came up with that and how that's led to the quality of interviews you have? Because you've got some outstanding interviews where people really open up and get deep with you.
Yeah. So, obviously, when I started out, I think we touched on before, I'm not a huge fan of my earlier work, but I was just sort of goofing around, chatting with friends, didn't really have a clue what I was doing. As I say, people told me, have a go at podcasting. And I just did it for, I don't know, shits and giggles, as we say in the
Sure.
UK. And then I kind of realized as I got more educated in how the production side of things works, the editing, which, by the way, shout out to my team if they're watching. They do a fantastic job at all that. Because I'd be lost without them. You know, I know I'm the face people see, but the behind the scene, in your case, you've got Brittany. So my producers aren't on screen like Brittany is. So yeah, I've got to give a shout out to them. They're the glue that holds it together. But yeah, so I as I learned more about the production side, I thought, this is interesting. Even at that point, though, even though I was getting more invested in it and it was becoming more of a purpose rather than a hobby, I sort of never thought I'd be able to scale it to where it's at now. And by no means is it a huge show, but it's a growing show, and it's a show that I'm proud of. I think my first moment is the first year of podcasting, I just interviewed local guests from where I'm from or from surrounding areas. There was only one or two who were maybe a little bit well known, certainly not outside of the UK, but known in our area that had interesting stories. And then I just reached out to a guy called Haribu Damagar. So he's known he's not a household name, but he was a former British Gurkha who is currently the only and first double amputee above the knee to summit Mount Everest. Wow. Now, he'd not long just done that challenge. Now, at the time, I mean, he's actually one of my smaller guests that I've had on, but at the time, this was a huge deal.
Huge deal, yeah.
And then I interviewed him, and then I thought, you know what? With this podcasting, people start somewhere. Let's maybe just reach out to a few different people. And that's what I did. And you do get a lot of rejections in this game.
Sure.
But you also get, what you've got to remember, and I'm sure you guys are already aware of this, is it's like we touched on with Graham and Randall, how we just took a punt contacting them. It's always worthwhile doing that, because even some of these bigger names that you could potentially get on, they've always got PR and they've always got media obligations. So they may have a book that they want to promote. They may have an upcoming TV show. They may have a project, particularly I've interviewed a lot of political people. They've always got a rally or a march coming up. So if you can give them a platform to promote that, then they're in turn going to come on and promote you. And this is just stuff I picked up along the way. And, you do get a lot of rejections, but then a lot of people will oblige to come on. And particularly last year, we had sort of some bigger guests come on, not to the scale who I've had on this year, but again, it's kind of growing and growing.
It's growing, yeah.
Eventually, we managed to monetize the show. One of our episodes went viral. It hit over, I think it's over 300,000, which is viral for us.
Congrats.
And then thank you. And then, yeah, it just sort of snowballed really from there. And then about halfway through last year, that's when I realized, you know what? This is great and all. I don't want to fall into that trap of just getting people on for clicks or getting people on for clout. I made a rule. I have to be interested in what the guest is saying. And I've stayed by that. Now, you mentioned about the face-to-face stuff. So we started out always doing face-to-face. It was easy. Logistics were easy. I was interviewing guys from my neck of the woods. As things materialized, it obviously becomes a lot harder to do the face-to-face.
Sure.
A lot of the time we have to travel. So we work in a studio, but we might have to travel to the guest if they can't get to Liverpool where we film. But again, I thought I don't ever want to I think once, like, you guys started out remote, right? So perhaps you guys haven't had that face-to-face podcast experience yet. Once you have it, you won't want to go back.
I know, that's why I don't want to do it, because then I won't want to go back.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
The goal is to eventually start having using. We had talked before, we looking into studios and stuff in the Atlanta area and whatnot. But yeah, and so you're doing the goal is to not go back, but then the issue is traveling, taking your team, taking your stuff, and you've got like a US podcast kind of tour planned, right? So this is gonna be a whole thing.
So when I first so that's happening in January. I won't reveal who I've got lined up just yet.
Oh man.
But, we can maybe have a chat off camera if we're not already up to speed. But yeah. that in itself, well, the way I look at it is, yeah, obviously there's a cost element, and obviously with the States, it's much bigger. I think you can fit the whole of the UK in Texas and still have room.
Yeah.
So it's a much wider kind of scale. So obviously traveling is a big part of it, I guess. Now, for me, obviously this is a project that I've got lined up. So this isn't something that I'm going to be doing every week. So most of my guests, they will travel to Liverpool. I've kind of made a rule that I'm happy to pay expenses for the guests to come up. I've never paid outright for a guest. I think if you're doing that, then they're not coming on for authentic reasons. They're coming on because it's a payday. I don't want to steer clear of any of that. So I don't pay for guests, which I'm saying this publicly because a lot of people think, oh, how much are you paying? And I was like, if I paid for all my guests who I had on, I would be bankrupt,
Right.
So I certainly don't pay for them. But I will come. Oh, sorry.
I was just going to say, plus it is an authenticity thing, and you can see the ones that get paid and the ones that don't. And I'm not going to name names, but it's sort of, they're just on there telling their old hits. You know what I mean? Saying the same things that they normally say.
I mean, everyone was convinced that I pay Graham Hancock, and anyone who knows Graham Hancock, which I get bragging rights to say I do now, he is not that way inclined, So I think people just. I'm
they
sure
thought you pay. Who said you paid him? Why would somebody say that?
Yeah, so I think because he gets called a grifter, and as a result of that, I think there was a few comments, which, by the way, I never take as gospel. So I'm just highlighting this for the sake of it. But yeah, there was a few comments saying, "Oh, see, Graham's grifting. He must have got paid by this guy."
Come on.
So, but anyway, so I don't pay. I always pay for expenses if the guest's got to travel far. See, the beauty of it is with the UK, we're quite fortunate. Is you're going to be at your destination within an hour or two. So wherever you go in the UK, it's you can literally cover the Land's End to John O'Groats, which is the most southern point to the most northern point of the UK, in like a day in the car. Like it's not that hard to do.
Right.
Obviously, it's vastly different over in Canada and America, of course. So with relation to the podcast tour, this is kind of like an exception to the rule, if you will, because I'm going out there solo, so there's no team with me. But one thing I have found in this podcasting space is the amount of podcasting studios that are out there. It just was not difficult in all the locations I'm going to find a studio. Right. There's literally one everywhere. And it's like that over in the UK as well. And I suppose that's testament to how big podcasting is right now, where there will be studios in some capacity. But yeah, the Hodgecast US tour, I'm really looking forward to that. Brittany has had a hand in coordinating some of that as well. So a big shout out to Brittany for that one. But yeah, so I'm looking forward to it. And you guys are going to be at the Cosmic Summit, I guess, next year. So we'll obviously finally get to meet in person.
You're coming to the Cosmic Summit?
I'm hoping to be there. Once I know when it is and details around it, I'll make a point. Because I couldn't get there last year. So I feel as though
outstanding. Well, Brittany's become a real insider. She knows stuff I don't even know it now. It's like
Brittany could be writing her own ancient civilizations book at this stage.
I think within a couple of years, you want to get on somebody's podcast, you got to go through Brittany. You want to get on the Hodgecast, you want to get on the Wandering Wolf podcast or you got to go through Brittany. But yeah, look at her. That's fun. But Brittany does a great job. And one of the things she does that you mentioned is being not afraid to just reach out to people. And if they say yes, they say yes. If they say no, they say no. We've had that same time where some people are like, sure, and so it's worked out great. Could you just, I know you don't want to tell us who, but are you sort of, give us an idea, how many stops are you making and like what kind of like topics are you trying to cover? You're going to do ancient history, you're going to meet some athletes. What are we doing?
Yeah, so this one's primarily, so I can kind of give a lot of this, so there's no athletes on this one.
Okay.
It is going to be very focused on the ancient civilizations, lost history, but there's also going to be some elements of religious connotations as well.
Okay.
I won't say what religion because that'll probably give quite a lot away. But there's going to be, I suppose with the ancient lost civilizations, there's a lot of religious elements with that as well.
Absolutely.
But yeah, in terms of the places I'll be going, so I'll be flying out from the UK to Miami, and then I head over to Tampa, and then to Atlanta, and then to Raleigh, and then back to Miami.
Okay.
So a bit of a loop.
Bit of a loop, yeah. And you're kind of staying in the southeast region, which is good, yeah. Because
That
you're right, it's
wasn't-
too big.
Yeah, I mean that genuinely wasn't intentional. It just happens to be. I mean, I'd have flew like to LA if I needed to. It just so happens that the guest happened to be in that pocket, which suits me just fine.
Right. Are you planning on doing any sort of nature or anything? Like, there's some bunch of cool national parks and stuff like in the southeast.
I would love to. Most of the time though, so I'm out there for just over 2 weeks.
Okay.
And I've probably got, if I'm not interviewing, I'm traveling,
driving or flying. Yeah.
And I've probably got a couple of days, and they will be the last few days in Miami. So if you've got any recommendations, first time in any of these places, so I'm open to hearing about it. If you know anywhere,
let me think about it, and I'll let you know. So we're doing this U.S. tour. We're going to be leaning into the ancient history lately, and I guess it's because it's been relevant. You've been covering a lot of, politics and stuff going on in the UK. Was that ever your intention to cover politics, or did it just become like sort of a thing that you felt driven or called?
So I've throughout my podcasting and my entire life, let's say, anything you do publicly, I've always steered clear from politics and religion, just because it's a minefield and you're never going to please everybody. And also, people can take religion and politics and it can get nasty. Like, I would never use it as nasty, but there's a massive, particularly in the States, there's a massive left-right divide right now. And it's frightening. And it's exactly the same over here in the UK.
Yes.
The only problem with the UK, there probably are some similarities. I mean, I don't know what your guys' take is on Trump, but I would much rather him than the current prime minister who we've got, because at least Trump backs up what he says. He might articulate atrociously at times, but he gets shit done.
The worst, yeah.
But over here in the UK, we just get fit. So Keir Starmer is our prime minister. I think he will go down as the most hated prime minister we've ever had. Main reason being he just lies. I know politicians are renowned for
lie. Yeah, but
this guy's pathological. I mean, it's got to the point now where whenever he's on screen, I switch off because I just I can find out what bullshit he's saying through another news avenue. But the issue you've got over in the UK is, as well as having a very weak leader who lies through his teeth, and all the people around him, it's not just him. The whole Labour. So we have Labour Conservatives are like the Republicans and Democrats in the States. Apologies, I don't know what they are in Canada, but
it's Liberals and Conservatives.
Okay, they've all got similar names, haven't they? They've just different meanings. But now at the moment we've got a party called Reform, which used to be sort of like so the guy who is the leader of that, Nigel Farage, he's good buddies with Trump, I believe. He used to be the leader of a far-right party called UKIP. So the United Kingdom Independence Party. I should know this because I'm interviewing the current leader of UKIP next week. So if he's watching, I apologize. I will make sure I know that for our interview. So Nigel Farage is the leader of another party, which was called the Brexit Party. That's where there was this big.
I remember all that.
Leaving, and they've just rebranded it. It's called Reform. So the UK's always been built off Conservatives and Labour as the two top political. It's either one or the other. But Reform's coming up the rear because Conservatives were in power for 15 years, and they just, sickly with COVID, just ran it to the ground. So everyone, I think that's why Labour got in through default. I mean, I'm giving a very condensed version here because I actually prefer American politics to our own. They're a bit more palatable, let's say.
Really?
Yeah. Well, the UK is if they're not lying, it's boring, So Yeah, but the problem they've got and why reform's doing so well is we have a serious immigration problem, and to the point now that we basically give handouts to any immigrants that come over, and I don't think it's. I mean, a lot of people will say it's racial to say or you're being discriminative, but a lot of these immigrants are coming from Islamic, right? So I'm not calling it tarnishing all Muslims here. Islamic countries, like Iran, like Palestine, like Syria, Iraq. They're coming over, but they're coming over and taking liberties. They're not coming over here to integrate with society. They're not coming over here to, refugees or find safe haven, although they say they're claiming asylum. They're coming over here and they're pretty much children. I don't know if I can say that word on here. I'm sure Brittany can beep it out, but
yeah, make a beep, but yeah.
Yeah, so I'll use a different word for that then. But they're coming over.
You can use it. We'll just beep it.
they're coming over and they're sort of attacking citizens. They've got this gang pack mentality because obviously they're coming over in droves. So they're all coming over here illegally. But for whatever reason, our government are housing them and they're putting them up. So there's a serious inflation problem in the UK. There's taxes are constantly going up. People are struggling. The weather in the UK, we're predominantly a cold country, and our winters, it's really cold. So, people aren't able to afford to warm up their houses because the tax have increased. The cost of living is sky high. And then they're putting up these radical Islamists, these illegal immigrants, as it were, and we're housing them through taxpayers' money in 5-star accommodation. And you're like, there's homeless people on the street. There's veterans that need looking after. So a lot of people, this has been going on for quite a lot of years now, but it's not until recently people have kind of woke up to it, and people are now really strong and against the institution. And what you answered why I got into the politics sphere. You can't really avoid it. Here in the UK, it's even if I was to if I interview anyone, and 90% of my guests are from the UK, it's going to get brought up in some capacity, or it's whether they come on to make a political statement or not, it's going to get brought up. So I've just got to the point where, I'm not shying away from talking about politics now. Like that, all that stuff I've just listed, I would never say that on a public platform a couple of years ago, but it's got to the point now where I think we need to just stop pandering to these terminologies. I mean, people now get labeled racist, Islamophobic, far right. I mean, far right was a term that was used for those who supported Nazis and Hitler. Like, some of these people are getting labeled far right, and they're anything but far right. They're probably more far left, but yeah,
they're just asking questions.
Exactly. And the whole racism card doesn't wash for me now, and
it doesn't wash for most people now. I think everyone's over that.
I mean, I think we know when you look in the mirror and you look at the person looking back, if you're racist or not. And I wake up, I look in the mirror, and I know I've not got a racist bone in my body. And for me, I see people first and foremost as people. I don't look at people for color. I don't look at people for sexuality. I don't look at people for what their religious beliefs are. If you can respect me and you can respect other people, then I can respect you. That's how I go about my life. But unfortunately, me saying that, some people will call me a far-right racist. So, yeah, if I'm a far-right racist as a result of that, then guilty as charged.
It's time to everyone to just start saying that, exactly what you just said, which is like, okay, then call me whatever you want, but this is my values and these are my principles, and I'm not going to, let go. And that's the thing, is similar stuff is happening in Canada, in the United States, and other countries in Europe. Correct me if I'm wrong, but this is my perception. What makes the UK so different is that, like you said, it's this size. And so if you move a bunch of like Islamic people from wherever to Ontario, there's plenty of room for them to not assimilate and no one to notice. In the UK, it's like you guys are right next to each other, like within each other, and so it's really become stark when one set of people is being treated one way, one set of people is being treated another, and there's no accountability. There's no like it's very strange. And so I don't want to put my tinfoil hat on or anything, but I mean, like do you buy into like this whole globalist agenda? Like there's like some
definitely. I think that's why I kind of gravitate towards quite liking Donald Trump, because he just is not conforming to. If there is a big elite trying to call the shots, he ain't playing ball. He's going by his own accord. But certainly, I mean, Keir Starmer openly said that he would support Davos, which is kind of like the United Nations, before he supports Britain. So that's your leader. That's the leader of your country telling you that I support these guys. Even though I'm in charge of you, I'm supporting these guys before I support my own. And
Davos is the World Economic Forum, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Wow, that's crazy.
He's saying that he's in full support of them over his own, and that's wrong, you know. But then he'll do it. I mean, he's this is how much of a coward he is. So he's gone on record to say a few bad things about Trump. But whenever Trump's in his company, he's the greatest. Yeah, kisses the ring, which I know he plays to Trump's ego. Trump loves that. But if you're a leader, you need to stand by your laurels. If you don't like this guy, vocalize it. Don't stand there, because you're demonstrating your cowardice. You're not willing to be yourself for your people. So how are we supposed to trust you as a leader? How are we supposed to believe what you say? And another thing, I don't know if you guys are privy to it, but they're trying to introduce digital ID.
So I'm just catching a wave of this, like the last couple of weeks. And like I said, when it comes to this kind of stuff, I'm really trying to like focus on like what my own life and like get better at being a basketball coach and stuff. But like, it's hard to avoid.
It's hard to avoid.
So I just started. So what I've been seeing is, first of all, over the last couple months, like protests, immigration protests, just rising up everywhere, massive ones. And then now digital ID protests. Is that correct?
Yeah. I mean, there's protests for everything here, but
is it every day? How's that?
Yeah, I mean, so in the UK, you can probably find in any major city there will be a protest for digital ID, protest for immigration, protest for pro-Palestine,
good job,
protest for LGBTQ+ community. It's never
every
ending.
Single one. Yeah.
I mean, there's a protest for everything. If you're ever over here, chances are there'll be, whatever you're into, there'll be a protest.
I said good job because what you're seeing is counter protests. So you all these super far left protests, you need a far right, quote unquote far right protest.
It certainly seems that way,
right? I think to be in the middle.
The protests are more of a political point scoring than actually. I mean, I would wager we in Liverpool, there was I was actually took my mum out for some food a couple of weeks back, and as we were cutting through Liverpool, there was a pro-Palestine protest, and I couldn't resist. I had to ask a few of the guys, but do you know, because I'm quite clued, I wouldn't say I'm an expert, but I'm quite clued up on the history of that conflict, and probably more so now with the podcast. And I asked a few questions off camera, you know, I literally just did it off the cuff. You know, the people, first of all, some of them didn't want to speak to me. I was faced with hostility, and all I asked is, do you actually know why you're protesting? What's the reason for it? And I spoke to several people, and no one could give me an answer. So that for me is people are just jumping on a bandwagon, not having a clue what it is they're Look, there's got to be nuance, without sort of going down this rabbit hole, but there's got to be nuance on both sides. Do I agree with some of the stuff Israel's done? No. I think they're despicable. No innocent lives should be lost. But what we also have to take into account is Palestine is governed by a terrorist organization in Hamas. So
I'm only laughing because it's like, you know.
Yeah, you couldn't, right? If this was an alien from outer space looking at the planet and you deliver them that fact, they would leave immediately, you know. So
I'd be like,
there is no sign of intelligent life anywhere, clearly. So but there's got to be nuance on it, and yet people just have this fixed dogmatic view.
Of course, there's nuance. That's why I don't get. It's like everyone makes it black and white, and it's one of the least black and white like situations on earth right now.
Exactly,
So,
exactly. And it's amazing because there's lots of conflicts going on around the world. I mean, there's
yeah.
about 10 different conflicts in this
Mhm.
continent of Africa. You don't hear about these though, do you? You just
Nope.
hear about the ones. I mean, Ukraine and Russia's gone pretty quiet all of a sudden, you know,
All
but
of a sudden, yeah.
that's not gone anywhere. That's still
No.
happening. So it's just whatever the narrative is. And I think why this one holds so much legs in terms of the mainstream is it's a religion. It's Judaism versus Islam. That's
Mhm.
how I interpret it. You know, this is why it's getting driven so much. But back onto the digital IDs. So
Yeah,
I don't know
please.
how aware you are of what these will.
So yeah, so how are they trying to implement them, and like what would that like? What are the implications?
So they tried to introduce this about 2 decades ago when Labour, ironically, were in charge the last time with
Hmm.
Tony Blair, who was heavily involved with George Bush looking for the weapons of mass destruction. That was
All
his
that,
sort of
right?
doing.
The WMDs.
Yeah, exactly. Which that was a roaring success, clearly. So that and then they've decided to bring that over to 2025 and introduce digital IDs. So they're trying to say that by introducing these, it will help eliminate immigration because we'll be able to vet them properly.
Oh,
That's
that's
how
how they're
that's
getting.
how
Oh
they're
my
marketing it.
gosh.
I can tell everyone I have spoke to, and I know a wide variety of people, left, right, gay, straight, various religious connotations. Everyone I spoke to doesn't want it. So that's something that we seem to be universally agreeing on. This is just a power play from the government. I mean, I'm big on numbers and polls, and I always put a poll on. And every time digital ID gets brought up, it's way over 90% are against us having it. Because what it will do is they'll start it off by just having it as a place that has your identification. We have a thing over here called national insurance.
Hmm.
That's to do with your tax. So it'll have all your details on it. But then they'll start doing what China did. They'll introduce a financial implication. So they will see your credit score. So
Okay.
if you're in debt or you've got a loan, this is personal information that only you and the bank should know about. But if you've got a loan pending, you might not be able to travel. Well, why should that stop you? You can manage your finances. I mean, we have like overdrafts over here, and sometimes people go in their overdraft because their boiler's broke, so they have to replace it, and you need that money to lean on. But that would mean that they then can't travel, or they can only spend so much at the supermarket, or they can only. So it's basically having this surveillance and control over what people are doing. Now, when you introduce that, you're no longer a democracy. That's gone. You're then a
Yeah.
totalitarian state in a
Surveillance. Yeah.
sense. Yeah,
Surveillance state.
a bit
Yeah.
like George Orwell's 1984. Another
At
book
least it
reference.
opens the door to that.
Yeah.
It opens the door to that because then they can surveil you. So here's what I don't like. So for example, like here, I feel like it's already like that.
Okay.
In the sense that like we sign over all of our data, right? So if you have a Gmail and a Bank of America and like a Google Pay account and stuff like that, they have everything. And then you probably didn't read, you not you, but American, they probably didn't read where that data gets shared. And then it gets shared in all these data centers and yada, yada, yada. And they know everything about you. And that's how they target you, all that stuff. Um, like, I guess what's the difference between that? I guess that's privatized versus like a state sponsored digital like surveillance, right? Is that
Yeah, so I think, yeah, I mean, that what you've said is we have that as well, but I think that's more of they're able to get the information to
they
use
pay
it
for
for,
it in
yeah, so that
advertising?
exactly. So they're using that as more of a marketing tool. And even though no one reads the fine print, I mean,
No
very
one,
few
literally
people,
none.
that you accept that and they know that, but there's no legal connotations to that. So they might have access to that data, but they can't act on it. With the digital ID, they can essentially
Mm,
because you're essentially giving them your soul. You're saying, here I am, here's everything you need to know about me. Do what you've got to do. And if they have full surveillance over you, then you kind of lose essentially you lose free will, or what you can control out of free will.
You do, and then it opens the door to like then now making laws based upon like what they know about you, right? Like, and so like for example, like you could potentially limit participation in society based on your digital ID and your, because it leads to the social currency score. Is that what
Yeah.
everyone's concerned about?
Yeah, well, obviously that's something that they've got in China, and as we've seen, it's not really been effective. I know China's not really a democracy, so they didn't get a say on this matter, but no one wants to follow. That's not a blueprint that people should be following. You know, we're part of the free world, and we'd like to keep it that way. I don't think anybody wants to. You know, we have laws, we have rules that we're supposed to abide by. Obviously, America have the Constitution, and we should abide by those rules. We then shouldn't be forced into doing something else around those rules, which is what it will be. And particularly when it comes to financial implications and, you know, stopping you, you know, we all, most people work full time. What leisure time they get, you know, on weekends or evenings or whatever, they want to be able to utilize that the best they can. If you're being told, oh, you can't do this because you can't afford it because you took out a loan, then you haven't got that, and then it kind of becomes, well, this is no longer a livelihood. This is It's ruined. You're basically, we become pawns essentially to the puppets to the puppet master, to the state.
Yeah, you only get to do what they say you can do, right?
Yeah.
So in the UK right now, you mentioned immigration and then this digital ID thing. What is the most urgent issue? Is it would you say the immigration thing? That would be my perception.
Yeah, I mean, so I often go on record. I'm not against immigration as a concept.
No, me neither. But
I think there's a lot of good in it, and you know, we touched on the racism card doesn't wash, but we also have to address there is a lot of racism, particularly in the UK, like actual, what I would class as actual racism,
of course,
where people are deliberately being hateful and offensive to people of different backgrounds. That stuff I condone. I think it's despicable. But now, because you've got people who very much like me who are against the control of the immigration and how it's being handled, it opens up the floodgates for the racist people to jump on the bandwagon, and this is how you create a divide.
Yeah, that sucks. I hate how that, because when you draw a line in the middle, then it lets the people on the fringe jump on your side, and you're like, I'm not with these guys. They're racist. I'm just saying that we need to be careful with immigration.
So immigration's definitely something that we need to get a hold of. You know, more and more, I'm tired of waking up, looking at the news. I tend to avoid it, but I just go through like the articles. And particularly if you ever hop on X, that obviously Elon's got that. So the algorithm's dictated by what it is you're searching or looking for. And whether it's mainstream or alternative, there's always somebody's been stabbed. Somebody's been, there's a terrorist group, there's grooming gangs.
There's a protest.
There's always something. And a lot of it comes down to the immigration aspect. And I think what needs to happen is there needs to be a level of deportations from the ones who are over here illegally, or certainly they need to be held into account. If not deported, they need to be vetted why we should allow you to stay in this country. And then there also needs to be tighter vetting at the immigration. So rather than us just basically saying, come on in, you have access to all of our, free world values and anything that we get in the UK, you're entitled to our NHS, the healthcare system here. It's all on a silver platter for you, and not actually vetting these people, because it also has a knock-on effect for the legal migrants who are coming over here for genuine cause. They're leaving war-torn countries. They are genuine asylum seekers. They do want to change their life. They do want to make something of themselves. They do want to contribute to society. And like most people in life, they just want to live a happy, normal life. And I welcome people like that with open arms, but it's diluted because of all the bad ones. And this is where, and this is because there's such volume coming over. So rather than it just being a handful and, some of them are slipping the net, there's that many, that net's wide open. There's no net to slip through. You're just going through regardless. So that's where we're at. And then the digital ID is not too much of a threat at this stage because it's not been implemented.
So has it been introduced like to the like, I don't know how you guys call it, but a bill or a law or whatever?
Yeah, so the government have said they're going to so we're due another general election in three years. If Labour survive for those 3 years, it'll be a miracle because people are chanting. I mean, we have a terminology over here called a wanker.
You
might have heard.
I'm familiar.
You're familiar. I'm not going to tell you what it means because it's probably it's a bit early over here. It's even earlier over your guys' side. But yeah, it's not a nice term you would label someone. But on most of these protests, the streets generally will chant a song, Keir Starmer's a wanker, and that's repeated. So this is your prime minister that's having this phenomenal tune sung about him. Yeah, so that's generally any protest, left, right, everyone's saying the same thing.
Saying that.
I can't see him, certainly not him, being around, but I don't know. He strikes me if he's so out of touch with reality, he's probably not even aware that they're calling him this. He probably still thinks he's the greatest prime minister of all time. But we have this general election, and then after that general election, I think reform will come in, who I touched on earlier. But Keir Starmer said that he will get the digital ID over the line before the general election. The reform, who are his competitor, they are against digital ID. So even if he does get it over the line, they will just revoke it straight away if they get in. The only way he's going to be able to continue that is if Labour remain in power, which I don't think. There's a possibility, but I don't think they will. So they've said it in the manifesto, they're going to do it, but it's not been executed yet. Plus, more and more people, there's a petition of like the population of the UK have signed it. So people are pushing back. And
good.
Even though we don't seem like we're much of a democracy anymore, we are. And fundamentally, the majority rules. The masses will always dictate on what happens at this stage.
And the people are standing up. They had to. They were forced to. And I'm glad. It's nice to see, honestly. Like I've been worried about. Like I'm Canadian and American. I have dual citizenship. I've been worried about Canadians for a while, and I've been worried about you guys too. I've been worried about us. It's a weird time, you know. But my point is that it's nice to see the protests because it's like you for example never talked politics ever on the really not something you got into, but things got so far out of hand and pushed so far in one direction that everyone is like, okay, enough's enough. Let's get out of our house. Let's get on the street. Let's raise some flags. Let's say no, right?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I don't know what it was like over the Atlantic, but here in the UK, politics has always been seen, up until recently, politics have always been seen as, I'm not bothered, I'm not interested, I don't matter, I don't make a difference. And I think it's because of that mentality, it's allowed these quote dictators to come in and try and call the shots. But then also people, particularly since COVID, people have lost faith in the mainstream news outlet. We touched on Graham Hancock. The mainstream academia has been debunked by alternative. Well, it's the same in politics. It's the same in like life, I guess. It's the mainstream is now debunked. You know, we've all got a cell phone or a mobile phone, as we call them over here. And that mobile phone is the biggest enemy to the state ever, because once upon a time so the media, particularly in the UK, they're governed by the state. They're like the BBC. They're governed by the state. They have the leverage on what they put out, and as are most mainstream outlets. So because of this alternative media outlet in terms of social media and technology, and the fact that people can create, people like me and you can just hop on and do a video, that is not great for the state, because now we debunk everything they say. So the stuff that they've been cramming down our throats, this is what, the vaccine, you've got to get this. COVID's, if you go near anyone who's got COVID, you will die. This is what the narrative that they told us since COVID. Now, digital IDs, stop being racist, far right, all this stuff. No, it doesn't wash with anyone anymore, because we can get our news sources from other avenues, rather than having to rely what comes through our TV sets of an evening. I can't remember the last time I listened to it. The only time I watch TV is live sport. I don't watch TV at all now.
Yeah, I don't either. And it's amazing how quickly like X or Instagram will push you into one direction really quickly by just clicking or even just slowing down. You scroll on like, I don't know, something divisive topic, and then you stop on it. It'll make a note of
Pick
that.
up on that, yeah.
Yep. And the next thing you know, you're getting all this like pushed into that direction. I go, why is it even showing me this? Like, and so I think it's just up to us to like really, be aware of propaganda and like unplug sometimes, set some personal goals, get away from the politics, but but when I say get away from the politics, I mean, get away from the theatrics, the theater that's put on for us, and pay attention to what these assholes are actually doing, and set some goals, right? Like, and set some goals, fitness, business, whatever you want to do, but like, don't let these people control your life,
Yeah, I mean, I literally, since starting, because I've gone on record to say, if I wasn't doing, especially the current climate in the UK and geopolitics as a whole, if I wasn't in this stage of life where I'm doing the podcast, I would come off social media entirely. Yeah. I literally just use the podcast, use social media for marketing the podcast.
Correct.
And I occasionally, because while I'm on there, I might throw the odd personal post on. But if you go back and look at my profile, you can count on one hand in like the past year anything personal I've posted. Mm-hmm. It's either, even I posted a fair bit about, or quite a lot about the 10 marathons, but that was a charity endeavor.
Sure.
So I was kind of promoting that. But you won't find much personal stuff on me as of late, because it just doesn't interest me. Like you said, there's always a narrative. There's always an algorithm. You're not seeing a real representation of who people are. And if people want to know stuff about me, then tune into the Hodgecast.
There you go. And that's why I like talking to people too. That's why I wanted to ask you directly, because what I see on what YouTube wants to show me about the UK and how it's, handling its current issues is not. I'd rather talk to the source.
Yeah, I think podcasting has opened my mind a lot. Mm-hmm. It's allowed me to, I go on record to say, if I didn't do the podcasting, I never in a million years would I be chatting to like Graham Hancock or you guys, because it's the greatest form of networking for me. It's, if you go onto a show, you have something you want to say, the guest has something they want to say, have a conversation. I mean, I interview people, but I also humanize them as well, right? Mm-hmm. At least I try to. So I've got questions. I try to as well. I want answers, but at the same time, if we go off in a tangent about whatever, I'm here for it. Let's just see how this flows. But it's good to have like structure, because Rogan gets away with it because obviously people are going to listen to him, whoever he has on. And his conversations are like 3-4 hours, some of them. So I only book up the studio for 2 hours, and that's, and even then, sometimes it's like, oh, we're done already. Like, because you probably noticed that I can talk quite a lot, which it's ironic really, because this is going to sound like a bit of a contradiction, but for the most part, I don't really enjoy people. Now, when I say that, I mean large amounts of people.
Right.
I'm not a huge. If I go to the gym, many a times I've gone to the gym. If it's a little bit later than I normally go and it's busy, I walk straight out. I'll go for a run today instead. But that's just people as a collective. I like individual people. Like, I find individual people fascinating. Everyone's got a story, but as a general overview, I try and avoid crowds and places like that as best I can.
I totally get it. I'm the same way. Hodge, where can everyone find you? Obviously, we're going to link everything below, but why don't you just tell us where to find you?
Yeah, sure. So obviously the Hodgecast is available on YouTube and Spotify. I was going to say just type in the Hodgecast, but I believe there's someone who's
I
already
found him.
who's
Yeah,
got
I'll
a
show
name.
it to you afterwards. Yes.
Yeah. So maybe search the Hodgecast. It's my face that you'll see, so that's how you can differentiate.
Just put the hyphen in Hodgecast, and that because if you don't put the hyphen, you get some other dorks.
That's some other guys. So make sure, yeah. So Hodge-cast. Of course, I'm on Instagram. There's 2 handles for me. One of it's hodge.N.of. That's my personal one, but again, most of it's just podcast related. And then there is a handle for the podcast page, which is _Hodgecast. And then I'm on Facebook, I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on X. I don't really use much of them, but you're more than welcome. I'll always accept people who send me a friend request or follow me. And I think that's it. I think that's pretty much it. Yeah. The main one to get me on is if you want to speak to me, Instagram is your best bet. If you want to watch my show, then the Hodge-cast is best place on YouTube or Spotify.
Very cool. And I just want to make a few suggestions on the next adventure that were popping into my head. So you did a boxing match. What about like a jiu-jitsu competition? Would you do that?
I really want to dip my toe. Admittedly, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu has eluded me for far too long. It's one combat sport I've never took part in. Lots of my friends do it. I only ever hear positive things about it. I suspect, Dave, you've maybe done it before because you're smiling. I want to do it, and possibly that might materialize to a competition. Can you give us some feedback? What's from someone who's done it before?
Yeah, and I'm no expert or anything. I've done jiu-jitsu probably 3 or 4 years in total, in my life. So, but from my perspective, it'll be something that it will be very foreign to you because it's not like boxing or anything like that. It's very different, and it'll be like something new. So that'll be the challenge, number one. And then number 2, I think you can get yourself within a year to 2 years to a place where you can safely compete with other white belts, at your age. And then it would be a really life-changing 1 to 2 years because it gives you a totally different perspective. It really does. And then it may force you to learn that meditation that you've been avoiding. Because when you've got some guy on top of you who's either stronger than you or bigger than you or better than you, you have to control your emotions. You have to control your mind. You have to control your breath. And I think that all that stuff goes along with running an ultra marathon. Similarly, you have to get yourself over a hump sometimes. And so I think you'd also take to it. My concern is you take to it too much. And then when you was
describing it, then I thought, this is probably something, maybe a retirement plan for me, because like you said, I think it would be something that I would take to and just probably abolish everything else. This is the only thing I'm doing now.
Okay. The other suggestion I had just popped into my head would be the Appalachian Trail. Have you ever heard of this?
I haven't.
The
No,
AT? All right, look it up and then get back to me, okay? But it's a doozy.
Okay,
it's a doozy.
I've just haven't. Okay, yeah, this looks pretty. Like refers to an online community source. I mean, I've already seen 2,197 miles through 14. Okay, yeah. I'm definitely going to go down that rabbit hole. So let's
go down
see.
The rabbit hole. Check out some YouTube documentaries of other people doing it and just see if it's something you might be interested in. If anything, you'll get some inspiration from the people pushing themselves, and maybe you'll get another idea. But the AT is sort of a pilgrimage that people do, and you kind of have to unplug. There's a whole community that's sort of an underbelly community. It's very interesting. So look into it.
No, most definitely. I can't believe I've never heard of it. It seems like something that I should know about.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Well, next time we talk, maybe you'll be in plans to do it. All right.
Next time we talk, I'll have done the AT, and I'll have hopefully become a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu.
There you go. And when you're in Atlanta, please, may I take you out to lunch?
Yeah, sure.
Outstanding.
Let's speak. You're on about when I'm there in January?
Yes.
Okay. Yep. I'm there. I know I'm definitely there on the 10th. But okay. I'll. You know what? Let's speak off camera about this.
We'll figure it out. Thank you so much for joining the Multiverse, Daniel Hodges.
It's been an absolute pleasure, guys. Much obliged.
Subscribe to Mike and Dave's Multiverse on YouTube, Spotify, and Rumble today.